Okay, yeah, my name is Bob Fischer, and I guess primarily I'm a writer these days. I write for a couple of national magazines, so the Fortean Times I write regularly for. This is, how do they describe themselves these days? The world's weirdest news. That's what the Fortean Times is. So I write a regular column for them called The Haunted Generation that is about the hauntology scene, kind of music and art inspired by the sort of fuzzy memories and the promised futures of a 1970s childhood. So that is the Fortean Times, and that I link that in with a website that I have called The Haunted Generation, hauntedgeneration.co.uk. Cheap plug, and the two kind of go hand in hand, really. I write for Electronic Sound magazine as well. I write about, well, funnily enough, electronic music. I do reviews and features for them. Again, that ties in a little bit with the Haunted Generation website. I write books. I've written a book called Whiffle Leave It to Full. It's a travelogue of science fiction conventions. This is exclusive, actually. Nobody's seen this yet, but this is my Last of the Summer Wine book. This is the only copy. It's the proof copy. And this is a journey through every single episode of Last of the Summer Wine, where myself and my friend Andrew T. Smith, who's filmmaker and writer from the Northeast, we've been watching Last of the Summer Wine in order from the start. And it began as a blog, summerwinos.co.uk, second cheap plug. And we turned it into an Edinburgh Fringe show in 2018, which then became a national tour. So, you know, it's us on stage talking about our love of Last of the Summer Wine. And there's now tie-in merchandise. There you go. That'll be out soon. In terms of stage, the Summer Wine show exists. The Summer Winos, say that toured in 2019. Also been doing a show called Scarred for Life, which is essentially me with two brilliant writers and archive TV enthusiasts and experts, Stephen Brotherston and Dave Lawrence, who are from Liverpool. But that's kind of become a touring show as well, somehow inadvertently. But we've done that in a few venues around the country, and that is essentially me on stage interviewing Steve and Dave about the terrifying television of the 1970s childhoods. As you can tell, kind of retro pop culture plays quite a big part in all of the stuff that I do. So there's all of that. I have a band as well, a kind of shambling amateurish band called Old Muggins, sort of Bonzo Dog Doodah band. And I guess a lot of people will know me from the radio as well. I worked for BBC Tees for 22 years, presenting all kinds of shows for them, including the BBC Introducing program, and I'm on a break from that at the moment, but you never know, could go back to it at some point. Who knows? Life is unpredictable, isn't it?
It certainly is. Yeah, I think we've all found that out recently. It's like Fortean Times once having been the weird news, and
yeah, it's a voice of sanity now. That is, you look to the Fortean Times for like a bit of respite from the weirdness of the everyday world. I was having spent, quite a lot of time in recent years writing about and enthusing about sort of 1970s dystopian dramas, the Day of the Triffids and stuff like that. I never thought I'd actually find myself living through one, but here we are.
Here we are indeed, yes. What have the writers got left?
Yeah, quite. No, it's do we live in curious times? Who was it said, "May you never live in interesting times"? Was that Confucius? Is somebody like that?
Yeah, so I think it was one of these wise old people that.
It sounds like him
coming into their own these days.
Him or Pete Waterman, one or the other.
Could have been. So tell me, Bob, where did this all begin? Is this something that you just you sprang from the womb involved in, or is it something that happened later in life?
No, honestly, I never made a conscious decision to think, right, that's it, I am now involved with the arts. My earliest memories are of writing stories, are of drawing cartoons, trying to imitate the comics that I got. The books that I had, I remember drawing Mr. Men at a very early age. I would have been, 4 or 5 years old. Star Wars was this absolute seismic impact on me. How old was I when I saw Star Wars? 5 years old. I just can't over exaggerate the impact that Star Wars had on me. I drew everything Star Wars. I wrote Star Wars stories, Doctor Who as well. All of this stuff is just something that's absolutely always been with me. It's just a completely intrinsic part of my childhood, and I've been lucky enough as an adult to be able to, I was going to say making a living out of it. That's possibly overstating things a little bit. I mean, there was certainly, I've never stopped doing it, but there have certainly been lots of occasions when I haven't made much of a living out of it. But I've always done it. The closest I've had to like a proper job, so to speak, was for 4 years in the 1990s when I ran a record shop in Yarm with the imaginative name of Yarm Records. But even then, I like the bulk of my working days were spent with my feet on the counter, being rude to customers and just listening to new music over and over again. What better opportunity to discover new music and new art than running a record shop where you can order in any piece of music that's presently available. Admittedly, it's not a brilliant business model, but as a 20-something music fan, oh God, it was heaven.
Absolutely. Well, I think we probably have quite a bit in common. I'm just gonna grab.
Go on, what have you got?
This is I don't know if you'll be able to see it. This is a template I used to make some of my my Mr. Men collages, which
wow.
was my first job, and then of course just over here we have my Star Wars. So yes.
Fantastic.
See that? So yes, I'm surrounded by relics of a 70s childhood as well.
They're just everywhere. The house is just overflowing with but you see behind you, that is a full collection of the 40 and Times there in the binders. But amazing. Above that, there's sort of Star Wars annuals and hang on. Anyway, so as soon as it's show and tell here, Lisa, see what I can find for you. There you go. Oh, blimey, hang on. There's a Star Wars annual.
Awesome.
Follyfoot annual 1974. That's a bit of a favourite. There's the Catweasel annual. And I've become so fond of Catweasel in recent years that I decided I wanted to look like him.
It's the lockdown look, isn't it?
It is. My barber's closed a year ago and it's never reopened. So I just thought, well, I've always been a bit of an old hippie anyway. I might as well go for the look.
Well, I think you're absolutely rocking it.
Well, that's very kind of you to say so.
Well, I'm quite a pagonophobe, but I found that I don't mind. I'm all right with beards when they're over Zoom. So
right, okay. Oh, sorry about that.
No, that's fine. I'm not. I don't discriminate against.
I can cover it up if you like. I can put a copy of some of Wino's book there. That makes life easier for you.
Glue it to your moustache. So why? I mean, obviously we were swept up with it as kids, but why have you dedicated your whole life to being part of it?
It wasn't a conscious decision. There was no point in where I thought this is it. This is what I want to do. I seem to have kind of drifted along a lot and just sort of, I've never been that ambitious. I've just done stuff that seemed really interesting or fun at the time. And a lot of that has been kind of tied into 1970s, 1980s pop culture. I mean, obviously it is a huge interest for me. And I find it really, I don't know, there are just so many strange little corners of that period of social history and cultural history to explore. I just never, ever cease to find strange albums, strange books, strange TV shows that have just been forgotten. I guess, and I think a lot of this is the fact that we grew up in an era when things weren't readily accessible. So I think a lot of our generation's fascination with particularly the TV that we saw as kids is that as far as we knew, we were going to see those programs once and never again. We had no way of recording them. And no great anticipation that we'd ever see them again unless they were repeated, but then again you probably missed the repeat. So I think there's a kind of longing to our childhoods in that so much of it, it's kind of fuzzy and nebulous and it's inaccessible. There's no record of it. We don't have even outside television, our lives weren't documented in the way that modern kids' lives are. You know, I think there's about 100 photographs of me in the first 18 years of my life. It was like, if you can imagine, you know, somebody born in 2021, probably 100 photographs on the first day of their lives. So I think the fact that lots of our childhoods are kind of inaccessible, and there are bits missing, and there are fuzzy memories that we don't quite know what they were or understand what they were. I think that has lent our childhoods a real potency, and there's a genuine sense of kind of longing to our nostalgia that I'm genuinely not convinced that kids growing up now will experience nostalgia in that way, because they won't have the missing bits. You know, everything they saw on TV as kids in the 21st century, they'll be able to see again, and they will always have been able to see it again. You know, they can just watch their favorite programs again and again on iPlayer, on streaming or whatever. So they don't have that, but I think our nostalgia has that real kind of sense of kind of poignancy about it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think my lads, they're 11 and 14 now. Nostalgia is for events, for like festivals as much as anything, because they've been going since they were born.
Right.
So they, you know, like the Willowman Festival that isn't going anymore, they really, really miss it.
Yeah.
Like, every year they kind of say, oh, it would have been the Willowman. But I think you're right about artifacts. But also, have you read Ridley Walker?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's like it's written from a 12-year-old boy's perspective in a kind of post-apocalypse dialogue.
Right.
So I just think about now, if, like, you know, if the internet was suddenly wiped out,
yeah,
and like it was post-apocalypse, it would be our generation that has physical artifacts that would be remembered.
Yeah.
All like the past 20 years could just disappear.
Isn't that fascinating? Yeah, I was thinking about that recently, because I was looking at, because basically my emails, like I very rarely delete any emails at all. So my current like email server, do you know what? I can check. I can tell you now how many messages it's got. It's got 66,777 emails in my inbox dating back to 2005. But you know, and that's great. So, you know, I can access them, and I can, you know, if somebody emails me, I can think, oh, well, weren't we talking about this 2 years ago? And I can check quite quickly. But nevertheless, essentially, they're all on like the hard drive of my PC. And if that hard drive went, I would completely lose 15 years worth of communications. It would just go. It would absolutely vanish. And yet I would still have the letters that I wrote to my friend in Canada in 1981, you know, they're in the loft, they're not going anywhere. So yeah, absolutely, it's curious, isn't it? With that access to kind of everything, but in a virtual sense, we kind of gain the immediacy of being able to revisit these things, but maybe at least jeopardize the permanency of that. That's an interesting dichotomy, I think.
Absolutely, really. And also, like, I think about like early on realizing that even though we think they last forever, DVDs don't last forever. You know, hard drives, you don't know what's going to happen.
No.
Every 4 years, printing, like having a photo book made, because that might be the only. It's like, as you say, I've got very few childhood photos, but they're gonna kind of last forever, and they've already lasted. You know, photos of my grandparents, they've lasted 80 years already. There's no reason why they won't carry on. Faxes, I've lost quite a lot of.
You know, I don't think I've ever sent or received a fax. That was a form of technology that completely escaped me.
Oh, well, Ken Campbell had a fax, and that was his, you know, he loved faxing. So.
Did he?
Whole ream of these fantastic faxes from Ken that
wow,
lost.
I can imagine. You know, Richard, I saw there was a trailer for the new Doctor Who Blu-ray appeared last week. Sylvester McCoy is turning into Ken Campbell. There's a genuinely striking physical resemblance now, which I think is really interesting, because I mean they worked together for a long time, didn't they?
Yes, on the Ken Campbell Roadshow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it really was down to Ken or Sylvester who became Doctor Who.
Yeah.
It was good enough to say you can do it if you want, but they thought Ken might scare the children.
I mean, that's the story I've seen, that he was told his audition was too disturbing.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's not beyond yeah, you can imagine that, really. But yeah, one my friend Irving was a good friend of Sylvester as well, and
Right.
one birthday of Irving's, we went up to Kenwood House for this, like, kind of quite, it was an outdoor concert and it was quite posh, but we all got very wrecked. Sylvester McCoy he kept making us sing happy birthday, but then he kept doing the Doctor Who, like, classic knock knock, who's there, Doctor Who, then he just go, me.
He's
We'll have to do it all over again.
He's a genuine eccentric, Sylvester. People say, oh, like, you know, to play the Doctor, you've got to be a bit eccentric, and you know, Sylvester absolutely is. Like, that is just him in real life. You know, I've met him briefly at a convention a couple of times. I was meant to be hosting a panel that he did at a convention, but he doesn't need his panels to be hosted. He just does it himself, and he wanders around and does it like a stand-up set. But I got chatting to him a little bit afterwards about, funnily enough, about Vision On and about Wilf Lunn and about that kind of, they say that whole kind of 1970s kids TV period was just riddled with sort of eccentric people that somehow found their way onto TV. You know, how did Sylvester McCoy go from the Ken Campbell Roadshow to like being on Jigsaw? How on earth did that happen? But it did. Nobody seemed to think it was particularly unusual at the time.
Yeah, well, Ken seemed to springboard so many careers. Like, it's every time somebody dies, I find out, my God, was he involved there too?
Yeah.
You know, he's like constantly getting recognition from people that I just didn't know about, you know, all the way up to like Philomena Kunk, you know, and Toby Jones, and just like everybody seems to have somehow been influenced, inspired by, or right, you know, directly been springboarded by Ken. You know, all the great actors that worked on Illuminatus. I mean, that was the beginning of so much for people. And you know, he's still a complete part of my daily life. In fact, I received my adoption papers today from his daughter, who we went on a pilgrimage in April 2019 from the Cern Abbas Giant in Dorset, the one with the big, to the Super Hadron Collider in CERN. It was like CERN to CERN, hard-on hadron. 69 of us on this double-decker bus, and apparently whilst we were out there, we conceived this magical orphan child that it's now manifested as this kind of wooden baby. Right. And we're all taking it in turns adopting it for a month. So yes, my adoption has arrived today. So this is
congratulations.
The I'm still having on my life. And actually, I mean, it was the first time that he rang me was because of the kind of 40-year events that have happened to my family. That was how I made myself interesting enough for him to decide to be part of his.
40-year events happened to your family?
Well, my mum's an identical twin, or was an identical twin, and her sister had an emergency cesarean, and she didn't know, and she was at work and just like went bang out on the typewriter at work as soon as her sister was under. And when my mum was pregnant with me, my dad was at home getting really agitated, just thought something was wrong, and kept ringing up, and they said no, it was all fine. So eventually he just got in the car and went down to the hospital, and as soon as he walked into the room, my mum flatlined. She'd been hospitalised through complications for a few weeks before, and so she was dead for 4 minutes and had the whole near-death experience. But for her it was like a woman on an old lady in a boat on a golden lake, and my mum wanted to get across to the island, and the woman wouldn't take her, and the moment that my mum accepted she couldn't cross was when she woke up again.
Wow, that's quite something. I was like, Avalon.
And this was ridiculous. So I'd lived in London 10 years by then, and I'd written to Ken about this like a couple of months before. And my mum had never come to visit me in London, and it was just like the door knocked, I opened it to my mum, and then the phone rang, and it's Ken saying, "What's all this about your mum then?" And that was the start of a very long and fantastic friendship.
Blimey. Oh, brilliant. Sorry, Lisa, have I ended up interviewing you here?
Well, it's the last one. I mean, I've got to the point of,
Demob happy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess, I suppose I should ask you about how lockdown's been and how it's affected you, and what your future plans are, or if you're even making any at this point?
I mean, in terms of writing, ironically, it's probably been pretty good for it. I've been able just to sit down and write without too many distractions. I mean, I don't go out much anyway. I appreciate I'm in a very kind of lucky position here where, I don't have any great social life or any great kind of social world that I was missing or anything. In terms of, obviously, in terms of doing stage stuff, it's certainly put the kibosh on that. We would have done another Summer Winos tour in 2020. That was absolutely the plan, and there were dates being booked in. We would certainly have done more Scarred for Life shows around the country again. There was a date on sale. We had a sold out London show that we were going to do. That just had to be refunded. Other dates that were in the pipeline. So that, all of that has had to go on the back burner. So, I mean, that's been frustrating, but, I've also been able to turn that time to writing, which is something that I really enjoy. And it's something that, I really want to do more of. So I've been able to do that. In terms of kind of, I mean, I know a lot of people have struggled with kind of mental health problems and stuff like that during lockdown, and I completely empathize with that. It is frustrating and it is difficult, and one of my big things for like dealing with that kind of thing is to be able to get out into the countryside and just to be able to drive onto the North York moors, and obviously at times when we've been in total lockdown, that's fair to say severely restricted, and that is a big kind of escape for me, to be able to go to kind of high up places, windswept, bleak, desolate places is they're pretty much where I go to. They're my happy place. So that's been frustrating, but I just kind of battle on, really, I guess. I feel sorry for lots of people that haven't been able to do that, and that haven't had kind of my luck, I guess, in being able to kind of turn it to an advantage. Difficult times for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, really similar myself here, because I work from home anyway.
Yeah.
I went out to maybe 1 or 2 creative events a month. Haven't been able to make use of our studio at the auxiliary. That's been really frustrating.
Yeah.
Just feeling really, really lucky, really, really privileged.
Yeah.
And escaping to the wilds of the North York moors whenever possible. Bought snow boots and waterproofs after getting stuck up there in a kind of felt coat and canvas trainers.
Yeah, that's not a good idea. I'd recommend snow boots and waterproofs if you go up there in the middle of August.
Yeah, exactly. So I've learned that lesson. But yeah, as you say, at the moment, it's just bizarre, because at the start of this, obviously it was in July, and we were just kind of coming out of lockdown, and everybody was kind of excited, and it's kind of been, who knows now?
There was a weird period, wasn't there, in sort of July, where it was kind of, right, well, we're just about back to normal here. We're getting there. But it only lasted about a month, and that feels like a dream now. I was like, did I? It's like the only time that I've been for a drink, on licensed premises in the last year was about 45 minutes that I spent in a beer garden in July last year. I was like, did that happen? Did that actually happen? It doesn't really feel like it did anymore. But yeah,
and
we're straight
time
back.
so out of joint. Like I got a reminder that I had the privilege of working with this brilliant LGBTQ plus youth group in Hartlepool at the end of 2019, and it was working towards a performance at Holocaust Memorial Day last January, and that reminder came out. I was like, can that possibly have been a year ago? It feels like an absolute other world to have been.
It's weird, isn't it? Yeah, because live shows that we did we did a live show. We did a Scarred for Life show in the first week of March 2020, And I remember being on stage and making a kind of vague reference to like coronavirus and well, at least we're all self-isolating together. I think that, it's something like that. And everybody laughed and nobody was taking it particularly seriously. Like even in, the first week in March 2020, I think people were still thinking, oh, it'll blow over.
Yeah,
There'll be
absolutely.
something else on the news in a fortnight.
Yeah, I remember going to Greg's comedy night I think it was at Skins and Needles or something like that, and people drinking Corona and joking about it, and but also my last night and my last performance before lockdown was International Women's Day last year, and so yesterday I got asked to partake again this year, so I kind of feel like, even though we're not able to do all that we can, we're doing the best that we can and keeping going wherever we can. And as artists, we've always lived in an unchanging, uncertain world where we don't know where the next paycheck's coming from. And so perhaps we've adapted better than a lot of people who thought that the world was stable and a place.
Yeah, maybe I've never taken any kind of income for granted, really. I've been through periods of being completely skint. And not having any. A friend of mine asked, a couple of years ago, he's like, God, how do you do it? Because you just seem to live hand to mouth. I was like, I've never thought about it. I've never worked any other way. So I don't know, really. Yeah, it's curious, isn't it? I would love it if somebody paid me a regular income guaranteed for decades on end to do the kind of nonsense that I did, and I do. But
I think it should be,
really
in the new normal should be that people are, paid to do what they love and what they want to do, and as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else and entertains other people, then I think it should be valued as much as anything.
Yeah, no, totally, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna leave it there if that's okay. Bob.
All right.
Be lovely talking to you, and I'll have to get you on my radio show so we can talk.
Yeah, I'd be delighted. Yeah.
An arbitrary 10 minutes, which this is, I think, would be near a half an hour, but it's we're allowed to indulge ourselves.
Oh God, no! I don't. My sort of 10-minute interviews often went on for an hour and a half.
Yeah, well, people are too interesting. What can you do?
Exactly. Yeah. No, I don't know. I don't know if I fall into that category. I just waffle on a bit. Hang on, the dog's just got on me here. Do you want my dog on camera?
Go, let's have one last shout from the doggos.
I don't know if she can reach out. Hang on.
We've had cats.
Megan, there she is.
There we go.
Come here, sweetheart.
Gosh, it is.
That was like a bit of Ken Campbell ventriloquism there.
Absolutely, yeah. Look for the rest. No. Cool. Got to go. I look forward to seeing you out in the real world at some point, Bob, and a big night. Me, Pete Waterman, my Simon Shaw, Michaela Strachan out here.
Yeah, totally. I'll be there.
See you. Take care, Bob.
All right. Cheers, Lisa. Okay.